Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CPN News Flash. Today, I'm joined by Alistair Harding, who is the writer, editor, producer, and director of We Came Here for Freedom, Parts 1 and 2.
We Came Here for Freedom is our story of what happened to us in February to March 2022. So what happened was we were inspired. There were a lot of people that got inspired by the Freedom Convoy in Canada. And so we did our own convoy. We had, if you can picture a map of New Zealand, we had two convoys. One started from the top of New Zealand at a place called Cape Reinga, and the other one started from the very bottom of New Zealand, a place called Bluff. And these two convoys went the length of New Zealand and converged on Wellington, our capital city. And it was the most incredible experience. I feel sorry for people who tried to ignore it. And a lot of people did try and ignore it in New Zealand. But it was basically, to sum it up, it was tens of thousands of people lining the roads for tens of thousands of others driving all the way to Wellington. And it was just the biggest outpouring of spontaneous love that you've ever seen in this country anyway. And so I'm a filmmaker, so I took my cameras along, and we didn't necessarily, we knew that the idea was that when we got to Wellington, we were going to camp on the lawns of Parliament, but I honestly didn't think I was going to do that. I thought that's probably going a bit far, but we did. We got down there, and the cars all just blockaded the roads around Parliament. And then on the end of the first day we were there, some people started putting tents in the ground on the lawns of Parliament. And before you knew it, there were a lot more tents there. And I ended up camping with my aunt in a camper van across the road from Parliament for 3 weeks. The police tried to get us out on February the 10th. So we arrived on, the convoy started on February the 6th. We arrived on about February the 8th, I believe. On the 10th, the police tried to get us out and failed miserably. And their brutality that day was shown by all the social media posts. And so what happened was, there were a few hundred probably there before that. But once people saw what the police did in trying to get rid of us, thousands more people came. And it became this, some people call it the Pro-Fest, like protest festival. It really did become a bit like a festival on the lawns of Parliament. And for a couple of weeks there, it was really quite massive. But as time went on, numbers dwindled, and the police put roadblocks up around us and started waking us up at 3 o'clock in the morning every day and so on. And it was like mental torture for a long time. And I just filmed as much as I could. I was filming probably 10, 12 hours a day. And then it came to March the 2nd, and it was quite brutal. That's probably about half of part 2 of We Came Here for Freedom deals with that. And you get to see it from my perspective, the whole journey. It's, I guess, in the end, because I was filming it, it's what I experienced the whole way through. And so We Came Here for Freedom is done in 2 parts. The first part is the convoy all the way through to just after the police tried to get rid of us the first time. And then the second part is from about February the 14th all the way through to March the 2nd, when the police did get rid of us. So that's We Came Here for Freedom.
And you've also been screening it as well around New Zealand. So could you talk a little bit about the screenings and how that's been going?
The screenings have been, again, another actually quite a life-changing experience. It's amazing how this movement just keeps giving and giving and giving. So what happened was we have a group here, a freedom community group called Voices for Freedom. I don't know if you've heard of them, but basically Voices for Freedom, we have groups all the way through New Zealand and all the different towns and cities. It was started by 3 amazing women, Claire and Libby and Alia. And so there are groups in all the towns and cities around New Zealand. So every year they have a conference where all the coordinators from each of those groups, each of those cities comes together, and they discuss, what they're supposed to be doing this, or what they're trying to achieve this year, and so on, and sharing stories. And so I was invited along with We Came Here for Freedom Part 2 just a couple of months ago. And so I just thought, okay, I made this film. I'm going to put it on the internet so there's no barrier to entry. I want as many New Zealanders or as many people to see it as possible so that people can know the true story of what happened rather than the media's version. And I just thought, okay, I'm going to show it at Voices for Freedom because I love these people. I'm a Voices for Freedom person myself, and I'll just show it there. And then in a couple of weeks, I'll put it online and everyone can watch it for free. But I went to show it, and then Voices for Freedom is amazing. As soon as I showed it that night, they all started getting together and they were going, oh, can I show it in my city? Can I show it in my town? And the next thing you know, about 2 weeks later, we had a 14-day tour going around 14 different towns and cities. And we started going around the North Island of New Zealand. And every cinema we went to, we sold out. Every hall we went to, it was packed out. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then after I launched the film on July the 2nd, I believe, online, I thought it was going to be all over. But actually, the people just keep on wanting to see it. And tomorrow I'm going and doing another one. Now we've done about 23 screenings in total. And we've got a whole bunch more. We're actually about to start on a new sort of mini tour going down the South Island as well. But yeah, that was the screening tour. And it's shown me what we're actually doing here. It's not just about the freedom movement. It's about humanity. I realize now it's about bringing people together. And there's nothing better than when you do these screenings and you stand in the lobby beforehand and you see all the smiling faces, the people talking and laughing and coming together. It's especially poignant to me because we're talking about a situation where governments and media tried to divide us, tried to separate us, tried to make us hate each other. So it's a really, that's why I say it's like The Convoy in a way. It's Convoy Part 2. It's changed my life in that respect.
And your kind of hope for this film then is these two parts, that you're going around, you're sharing this around, obviously around New Zealand, as to try and get as many people to see this in New Zealand as possible, but obviously it's available globally.
Yeah.
So what is your kind of overall goal for making these two documentaries? Well,
the first thing is, I remember when we first went down to Parliament and I had my cameras and I'd meet people and they'd say, well, why did you want to come here? Why did you want to do this? First of all, they'd ask me, what mainstream media are you from? And I'd explain to them what I was doing. And, but then they'd ask me, why did you decide to come, or why do you think you should come and do this? Because it's a lot of work, right? But the main reason is because we can't expect the mainstream media to tell our story. They will come around and they will tell our story one day, but it'll be in 20 years' time and they'll be using archive footage. One of the things from where they were standing, and one of the things you noticed in New Zealand, and you see if you watch We Came Here for Freedom, is you'll see the media stands up on the balcony of Parliament and films us from there. They never actually came down. Sorry, they did come down into the protest, but it was very, very rare. And they always had security guards around them as if we were some sort of big dangerous mob or something like that. And it was, as I said, it was very rare. So when you see them standing up there on the balcony, I don't think there's any greater symbol of why we had to do it, because they were doing it from the government's perspective. And I can't give any better example of how far the media has fallen. So that's the first reason why I want it. What I hope from it is that we actually are able to tell the story, the true story, from from the perspective of the people who were there and who were hurt by these draconian regulations and the injuries and the deaths and the business failures and all of those things, which just destroyed New Zealand and has left some massive scars on this country. And it's the same. And so it's the same around the world, isn't it? And I think in that respect, I think this is a skill that I have, that I can tell that story. This is not just the New Zealand story. This is the story from all over the world, especially the Western world. Yeah, so I guess that's my hope, is just that we preserve this story and we don't forget it. I mean, it's the old lest we forget situation all over again too, isn't it? So I've made it free for people to watch because I want as many New Zealanders to watch it as possible. So I could try and put it into a film festival. Now, I don't think any film festival in New Zealand would actually take it because they're all sponsored by government departments and so on. But even if I did, it would get an audience of, maybe a few hundred or 1,000 or something like that. But this way, by making it free for people to watch, we get as many to see it as possible, and hopefully as many to open their eyes and see the truth as possible. As far as the rest of the world's concerned, the media has just shut everybody's voice down all over the world. So like I said, if you can see a little bit of you in this film, then that's a good thing. Also, we all need to tell our stories so that in every country that we see we're not the only ones. One of the things we noticed when we went down with the convoy to Wellington was that probably the most said thing was, "Oh man, I'm not alone." And I think, these kinds of films that are coming out all over the world right now, they're saying the same thing, aren't they? We see them in different countries and you go, that was me in New Zealand. That was me in the UK. I'm not alone. And that's where we get our power from, because once we know that, the strength of people power will prevail.
Absolutely, it will. How can people watch the film? Where can they find it? And any other links you'd like to share?
Okay. So We Came Here for Free. It's nice and easy, not nice and long, but nice and easy too. WeCameHereForFreedom.com. Just put a .com on the end of there. What I've done is you've got both part 1 and part 2 of We Came Here for Freedom on there. But also there's I've tried to start a sort of a museum exhibit, an online museum exhibit sort of thing of people's artwork, paintings, poetry, music, writing, photography, things like that. So after you watch the film, you can read a few of the other stories that people have see the artwork and hear the stories of people who were there. One of the things that happened while we were there was one of our MPs labeled us in Parliament as the river of filth. And I always think of that as being, they were dehumanizing us. And so We Came Here for Freedom.com is all about rehumanizing us, and telling the stories of the real people who were there. So yeah, that's the only link there is, We Came Here for Freedom.com. The film is on Rumble. We have part 1 on YouTube as well, but you'll find it all at WeCameHereForFreedom.com. And if you don't mind too, if people are watching this, if you do watch it and enjoy it, please do share it. We're a very small country in New Zealand. We have a small population, but the more views we can get on this thing, the more it really helps to legitimize this story. And so by sharing it around the world, by getting those numbers up of views, it is such a great help for us here in New Zealand. So that's what I'd just like to ask you, is that if people do watch it and they do like it, please do share it, because it helps us so much.
Thank you, Alistair, for doing this. I think, the first thing is just acknowledging the power of actually sharing this content that, so many of us are busy working long hours, putting stuff together. because sharing it reaches more people, and those people, you don't know the butterfly effect that's happening, that's causing as it's going out and reaching new people. And then also, with projects like your documentary, you've just got, there's going to be people that go and watch that film who already, were maybe part of the protests and things like that, but they might bring friends with them as well.
Yep.
So it's expanding that, waking up, or whatever you want to call it, to the realization of what actually is going on in the world.
Yeah, and look, there's a story I'd love to tell you just very quickly. This is about people power. This is how we actually regain our freedoms. This is how we win this battle, is people power. There was a great story about that from our experience down in Wellington. So when we were doing the convoy, right, people would go and see the convoy and go, oh, I've got to be part of this. And they would start hitchhiking or whatever to come with us. And there's this one lady, her name's Rebecca, and Rebecca comes from the far north of New Zealand. So she hitchhiked from her very rural place into one of the towns, and she saw the convoy go past, and she went, man, this is amazing. I'm going to hitchhike to the next big town. So she hitchhiked to a place called Whangarei, which is the biggest city in the north of New Zealand. And she saw the crowds there, and they're getting bigger, and she's going, man, this is good. And so she hitchhikes again. So she's still wearing the same clothes that she got up that morning in, right? She hasn't got anything else. She ends up hitchhiking all the way to Wellington and sleeping in a tent on the grounds of Parliament. She's so taken up by this. 2 days later or 3 days later, when the police came in for the first time and tried to arrest people, and you'll see this in part 1, and you'll hear her voice in part 1 talking about this actually. She got arrested. She got dragged out of the line and arrested, and she ended up in a jail cell. So going from hitchhiking to being arrested, and about 120 people got arrested that day. So I'm just guessing, I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing about half men, half women. Okay. And they put them in 2 different holding cells. They'd get their bail conditions saying, oh, you can't go back to Parliament, or you can't go within 500 meters of Parliament, or you have to go back to your hometown and you can't come to Wellington. Bail conditions like that. So they wouldn't be able to protest again. And one by one, people were leaving until finally there were 7 ladies left. And they decided, no, we're going to continue our protest here and now. We're not stopping. So what they decided to do is, we're going to clog up the system. We're not signing our bail conditions. That's number 1. That's it. That's our bottom line, because we haven't done anything wrong. And so the police kept them in the police cells. And then it came to the weekend. So that happened on the Thursday. By the weekend, by the Friday night, they were still in there. So the police go, well, what can we do with them? We can't keep them in here. The weekends is our busiest time. So they put them into a woman's prison. So, of course, when they go into the prison, they get asked, you're going to have to do a COVID test. And they say, no, we're not. We don't consent to that. And so they had to put them into solitary single cells. So they're clogging up the system, right? There's no, these cells are for real prisoners, and they're using them up. And then they still stayed together. And in the end, what happened was the police kicked them out of prison because they were taking up cells that real prisoners were supposed to be using. And because they just kicked them out like that, that meant that they had not signed their bail conditions. So that meant that all those 120 people who got arrested that day had their bail conditions wiped, all because of these women, these seven amazing women who just held together. And the way they held together in the prison, to me, is just such an inspirational story. The doors to their cells had little slits at the bottom of the cell door where they'd put the tray through. Apparently, I never saw it myself, but there's these trays there, right? And so they would lie on the floor and sing through these slits to each other. And they'd sing things like, you can stick your vaccine mandate up your ass, and stuff like that. We'll keep on camping on the grass, all of this stuff. And that's how they stayed together. That's people power, right? And I just find that story amazing, because when you think about it, what they did was that they separated these girls. They put them into a prison. They tried to make them as powerless as possible, yet they somehow found a way, when they were at their least powerful, to be their most powerful. And that's what we have on our side. People power. We have sheer force of numbers. So yeah, just, I know, long story, but that's the whole thing again about sharing it, everybody just getting in together. And that's what people power does. And like I said, all of those protesters who got arrested that day ended up with no bail conditions. And because they had no bail conditions, they could all go back. And it was a wonderful, wonderful thing to happen. And just to think that seven women, all separated into 7 different cells, could do that.
Yeah, very inspirational story, and a really good example of the power of, if we just start coming together and supporting each other and networking and collaborating. And that's what I'm really passionate about. Alistair, so thank you again so much. Everybody, please check out both part 1 and part 2 at WeCameHereForFreedom.com, and please share it with on your social media. Share it with people that you would like to suggest that they watch it, and let's get the message out so that we can come together and unify for this thing. Any last words?
There is one last thing. That, look, this is so important for us all, because it's about freedom of speech. They tried to silence us. And we have to, for the sake of humanity. Freedom of speech is about testing idea A against idea B. When you take one of those away, we only make mistakes. We end up doing things like sticking untested medications in billions of people's arms, and who knows what is going to come out of that. So, let's just keep fighting for freedom of speech, for telling the truth, of dedicating ourselves to the truth. And thank you so much for doing what you're doing, because that's exactly what is going on, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alistair.